According to a senior naval expert, the Ukrainian military has a chance to remove all Russian soldiers from the land they have occupied since February. Professor Michael Clark said this would be a huge success and that retaking Kherson in the south would be very significant if recent victories in Kharkiv are necessary. Kherson, located immediately north of the peninsula of Crimea, is the only sizable Ukrainian city that Russia has occupied. Professor Clark said that if Ukraine were to reclaim Crimea, the whole territory, which Russia took in 2014, would be within range of Kiev's artillery and missiles. This might make it very difficult for the Russians to operate militarily from Crimea, he said. There are indications that the Russian defense in Kherson is deteriorating and that soldiers may run out of ammunition. The Ukrainians have gained momentum, which is of utmost importance in combat. Professor Clark observed several unsubstantiated reports that local ceasefires or surrenders are being planned, particularly in the north of the Kherson area. The Russians seem to be out of food and everything else. When they run out of ammo, they are compelled to either surrender or flee. And they cannot flee because they cannot bridge the Dnieper River. He continued, the Russians are definitely under pressure, and they may or may not fracture in the same manner they did in Donbass. However, the Russian forces recruited at Kherson are significantly superior to superb troops in general. Therefore, it would be highly significant if they do fracture in that location. Professor Clark predicted that the Ukrainian attack would eventually lose momentum, but not for some time. And when the Russians reset, the situation will get even more difficult. The Russians can dig in over a 2,400-kilometer front line, he said. Professor Clark said that Kherson controls Crimea's accessibility and part of the hydroelectric electricity that enters Crimea. He said, if the Ukrainians can recapture the whole shoreline of the Kherson region, then the entire Crimea is within range of their artillery and missiles. If they chose, they could make it impossible for the Russians to flee Crimea with military force. Professor Clark predicts an unstable ceasefire that may now be on more favorable terms than the Ukrainians could have predicted even a week ago for the next year. He said, I believe the Ukrainians may have a chance, after winter turns to spring, to oust the Russians from all the lands they've seized since February of this year. And it would be a tremendous triumph. The stats are devastating for Russia. From Wednesday to Sunday, at least 338 pieces of Vladimir Putin's military hardware, including fighter jets, tanks, and trucks, were destroyed, damaged, or captured, according to the open-source intelligence website Oryx, as Ukraine's forces blitzed through Russian-held territory in an offensive that stunned the Russians with its speed and scope. Since the beginning of September, Ukraine's senior military commander has recaptured more than 3,000 square kilometers, 1,158 square miles, of terrain. In addition, the British Defense Ministry said on Monday that since Wednesday, Ukraine has regained land equals to at least 2 Greater London. According to Ukrainian accounts, Putin's forces are retreating east to the Russian border on every kind of transportation they can find, including civilian automobiles taken since the beginning of the conflict in February. Since Putin's so-called special military operation began, Russia has not even come close to living up to its pre-war reputation as one of the world's most remarkable powers. These Russian defeats result from various pre-existing issues that are now meeting head-on with a Ukrainian force that has been patient, methodical, and equipped with billions of dollars worth of Western military technology that Russia cannot match. Analysts predict that the Ukrainian successes will increase without a dramatic and maybe unorthodox intervention by Vladimir Putin. Many of Russia's shortcomings, ineffective and inflexible leadership, low army morale, weak supplies, and gear plagued by maintenance concerns have been apparent from the war's inception almost 7 months ago. The empty heart of the Russian military, including tanks that were easy prey for Ukrainian ground soldiers and trucks that lacked the proper tires to traverse Ukraine's terrain, was immediately exposed by Putin's ill-conceived blitzkrieg tactics. Remember the 64-kilometer, 40-mile convoy that became delayed on its approach to the capital of Kyiv and was subsequently destroyed by Ukrainian defenders? As this convoy was delayed, stories circulated that Russian soldiers had serious morale issues. Some did not even realize they were in Ukraine, or if they did not know why. As the conflict increased, Ukrainian troops targeted the Russian leadership, eliminating generals and colonels who were anticipated to unite the Russian forces. Moreover, if stories of troop suffering are accepted, the Russians need far more outstanding leadership. Pavel Filatov, a Russian paratrooper who participated in the conquest of the Ukrainian city of Kherson by his army early in the conflict, said that his battalion lacked even the most basic supplies throughout that operation. After encircling Kherson for many days, many of us lacked food, drink, and sleeping bags, he stated. It was so chilly at night that we were unable to sleep. To be warm, we would cover ourselves in garbage and rags. He said that their weapons were inadequate. He said, all of our weaponry is from the era of Afghanistan, when Russian soldiers fought between 1979 and 1989. Meanwhile, Western armaments have poured into Ukraine, including modern artillery systems such as the High Mobility Artillery Rocket Systems, HAARPs. The wheeled HAARPs include what U.S. maker Lockheed Martin refers to as shot and scoot capabilities. They can fire extremely precise rockets at targets 70 to 80 kilometers, about 50 miles, distant and then swiftly retreat to escape a counterattack. Ukraine has devastatingly used them on Russian supply routes, ammo storage facilities, and command centers. Ukraine's military forces used HAARPs and other Western systems to assault Russian ground lines of communication in Kharkiv and Kherson oblasts, laying the groundwork for the success of this operation, the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, noted in a Sunday blog post. According to Western assessments, the assault on Russian supply lines by Ukrainian HAARPs has been unrelenting. Ukrainian long-range artillery is likely striking Dnipro River crossings so regularly that Russia cannot rebuild damaged road bridges, the British Defense Ministry said on Monday. Trent Telenko, a former quality control auditor for the Defense Contract Management Agency of the United States who has studied Russian logistics, reported that Ukrainian forces used precision rockets fired from HAARPs batteries to destroy key large Russian arms depots near rail lines far behind the front lines. This necessitated the employment of trucks to transport artillery and ammunition to smaller depots, making distribution more difficult, according to Telenko. As a result of its scattered battery, Russia was unable to deliver sufficient firepower to halt the Ukrainian advance when it launched its rapid attack, he claimed. ISW said that the HAARPs and other potent Western artillery weapons should not get all the credit. They were linked with Ukrainian deception and cunning. According to Ukrainian authorities and video of equipment moving across Crimea, Russia redeployed soldiers to the south last week to boost its numbers ahead of a possible Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Kherson area. This allowed Ukrainian soldiers to advance farther north. Kiev's lengthy debate and declaration of a counteroffensive operation directed at Kherson Oblast pulled significant Russian forces away from the regions where Ukrainian forces have undertaken decisive strikes over the last several days, ISW added. Mark Hertling, a retired U.S. Army general, said that after the Russian troops had advanced, the Ukrainian military explored for weak places in the Russian line. They were able to do reconnaissance with a small force to determine where to execute a much greater breakthrough, moving tanks and artillery through the openings in the Russian front and then into the Russian rear regions, Hertling said. The rapid Russian withdrawal has allowed Ukraine to seize Russian guns, ammunition, gasoline, and supplies in these posterior regions, according to Telenko, who added that adding trucks and trains to Ukraine's arsenal would supercharge Kiev's gains. Additionally, analysts have observed the absence of Russian air assistance. Richard Hooker Jr., a non-resident senior member at the Atlantic Council, said last month that Ukraine had essentially ignored Russian air power by combining outdated anti-aircraft weapons already in its arsenal with U.S. and German weaponry. Hooper said on the Ukraine Alert blog of the Atlantic Council, Ukraine has been extraordinarily successful in denying Russia air superiority via very effective air defense and air denial tactics. And Russian losses are fuel for much more significant difficulties in the future, a cycle of defeats that Moscow may be unable to halt. In a tweet, Mick Ryan, a former Australian Army general and an adjunct scholar at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, referred to it as cascading failure. Each defeat and retreat on the battlefield leads to greater failure, he continued. As alternatives diminish, so will the morale of the beleaguered Russians. As retreating soldiers march back, they will carry with them tales of their departure. It will be almost hard for the Kremlin to prevent these rumors from spreading among its military and to the family of its soldiers. The land Russia secured in Ukraine over 7 months, at the cost of tens of thousands of Russian lives, was lost in 1 week. And it seems that Russia's generals have no quick response. Even as Putin's soldiers advanced, they did it slowly and laboriously. And previously, in the fighting, Ukrainian forces never abandoned their positions as Russian troops have done in the last week. The British Ministry of Defense said that the already low-confidence deployed personnel in Russia's top military leadership is likely to erode further. According to the ministry's assessment, the Ukrainian strikes hampered Russia's ability to transfer replacement soldiers to the front lines. The crucial issue is if Russia has newly trained forces available to advance. In July, Russia appealed for more than 30,000 volunteers to aid the Ukrainian war effort. The allure was significant cash incentives with no experience required. However, Katerina Stepanenko, a Russia researcher at ISW, said these recruits would likely be of limited use on the battlefield due to a lack of training time. According to experts, training a tank crew may take at least several months and occasionally more than a year. Short-term training is unlikely to transform inexperienced recruits into capable warriors in any unit, said Stepanenko. And it will be difficult to replace the more than 300 pieces of Russian equipment that have been lost, damaged, or abandoned on the battlefield for several days. Western sanctions have hampered Russian industry. Already, Russian weapon stores have been plundered to compensate for previous losses. Yakub Janovsky, a military expert who writes for the Oryx blog, said that even if vast quantities of armaments remain at these depots, they are likely outdated and need maintenance or refurbishing. In actuality, replacements are often considerably older vehicles, which are prone to dependability issues and less effective in battle, he added. Moscow has industrial potential but lacks the most outstanding components for what it might produce, according to Janovsky. As a result of penalties, they may be forced to replace sensors and electronics with inferior alternatives, and the quantity they can produce soon is a fraction of what they are losing. Russia cannot sustain these significant losses, he said. Therefore, Ukraine has the upper hand in the short term. The former Australian General Ryan, though, remains wary. It is too soon to use unduly triumphal language. Russia retains the capability to retaliate. The Russians still occupy the south and east. The Ukrainians have scored a major victory, but the fight is not yet won,